Yeah, thank you, Rob. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak at RISE. I appreciate everyone coming out and everyone who's watching the WebEx. He kind of covered it here. I've been doing this for probably about 8 to 10 years now, and not professionally in any sort of control environment, but I have been, just through the power of the internet, learning and, mastering, the craft, and, eventually I got my cert, OSCP and everything. And so we already talked about that, so we're going to move on and just jump right into it. So
hold on 1 second, just real quick.
Sure.
Hey, the folks that are on the phone, can you guys hear okay?
Yep, you can hear fine.
And is the screen presenting okay?
Yeah, I can see the PowerPoint. Yep.
Awesome. Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure you guys are getting a good experience.
Excellent. So this is going to be a high-level overview. So what is Burp Suite? Well, Burp Suite is a web application attack proxy. And an attack proxy basically sits between your browser and the local machine and allows you to modify and manipulate requests that are sent, to, your respective hosts through HTTP, HTTPS. Doesn't really matter. It's been in development for quite some time. Is the gold standard. There's pretty much every other tool that's been created that's like it is modeled pretty much around how it works. So basically, with Burp Suite, you have three price points, or not price points, but I guess additions. The free is, free. Comes standard with Kali Linux. You can download it free for Windows from Portswicker's website. It's easy to set up and install. Premium and Enterprise Edition. Premium has a lot of nice perks. I'm not going to lie to you today, but I'm not here today to sell you Burp Suite. What I'm here today is to demonstrate, how the tool works. For $3.99 a year, if you're a veteran pen tester, if you're really, into bug bounty hunting, if you're serious about this, I would recommend the $3.99 per year version. It is worth it. However, again, I would master the free version before you go jumping into the premium version. That way you're going to get the most value out of the premium version, because really with the free version, you're going to be able to jump in and get started and begin auditing web application security right off the bat with the free edition. Easy to set up. And again, that's what we're going to dive into right now. Highly recommend using, again, Kali Linux machine.
I apologize. I just want to mute everybody.
Yeah, that's cool.
Actually, those are on the phone. Can you guys mute yourselves? I apologize, but we're getting some feedback from you guys. I'm sorry to be so disruptive. Thank you.
Thank you. So again, just for ease of setup and ease of use, highly recommend just downloading a Kali ISO online. You can install it on Windows. There's nothing inherently wrong with it, but realistically, just having the other tools at your disposal right then and there, it's just going to make a lot more sense, and it's just honestly probably going to be a better use case or situation. So all involved, and I'm about to demonstrate this in just a second, would basically be setting up your browser to proxy through a local host, whatever port you've selected in Burp. And you've got to export the Burp root CA, because if you don't, if you're trying to go to a site, it's got an SSL certificate, it's got HTTPS, it's not going to work because obviously it's encrypted. So you need the root CA from Portswigger in order to decrypt that, SSL traffic. So this is the fun part. What we're going to do here is basically go ahead and jump right into the tool. And I'm going to do here, show taskbar. So what I've done here is I've got a lab set up. It's a Vagrant box, basically running on localhost, running the damn vulnerable web application. DVWA is a web, basically ISO live boot machine. It's intended to be hacked for all intents and purposes. Obviously, just a word of advice or note, I'm sure everyone in here is aware of, that obviously using, tools like Burp Suite to attack sites that you don't have permission to is obviously 1,000% illegal, a felony, whatever you want to call it. It's just not, you shouldn't be doing it. Unless you have express permission to from the site owner, it's a part of a pen test. So in Kali, what you can do is you can just jump right down here and just immediately search Burp Suite. It is pre-installed on Kali by default. And basically, all you got to do is just fire it up. And you'll get a little Java warning message, but you don't have to worry about that. And essentially, with the free version, you're going to get the option for a temporary project. We're just going to hit next on these defaults and then use these defaults as well. So now what Burp is going to do is it's going to start up. And I'm going to go ahead and blow this up a little bit. Now, I'm going to kind of touch base later on really the differences between the free and the premium version. One thing right off the bat you're going to notice is a lot of this stuff on the top right here, the automatic vulnerability detection, not available in the community edition. So it's not just right-click, run an automated scan, get results, get shell. It's going to have to be a little bit more manual than that, but however, again, you've got everything you need right within the free version in order to get started doing this. I don't recommend just using automated scanners if you're going to try to start automating, or auditing web application security. Your best finds are going to be through manual inspection, especially for, things like bug bounties and such, because these are typically hardened machines you're going against. Your typical web DAV scanners and things like that are going to, crack a hole in it. So what we need to set up first when we're going into Burp is we're just going to go over to the Proxy tab. And under Options, the default is to run on localhost and with port 8080. That's fine. I just leave that default just for simplicity. When you export the root CA, all you just need to do is hit import/export root CA. You'll just do certificate in dir format. Now, I've already done this, so I'm not going to re-import it because there's no reason to. But then from that point, all you got to do is open up your browser of choice and go into the settings. Now, this may vary a little bit depending on your respective browser, but it's going to be probably called Proxy Settings of some sort, right? You go in here and you'll match manual proxy configuration for an HTTP proxy to localhost port 8080 to match what Burp shows right here on the left side. Now, once we've done that, all we need to do is go to the certificate management in your browser. Again, this may be called something different. It's not going to be much different. Typically, all browsers kind of function the same way when it comes to this. You go to import, and you'll see where I have the cert in my downloads folder. You can actually go to a browser URL. It hosts a little HTTP server locally on your machine. You can just visit the link it gives you, and you can download the root CA from there to whichever one you prefer. I just exported mine. You import it in there, and then you'll get the option, to have it.
So you imported the cert from where?
From Burp Suite, right here.
Okay.
Yep, you export it from right here, certificate, and you've got to do this in order to be able to intercept HTTPS traffic. Otherwise, you're going to get the encrypted version with just the headers.
Sorry to interject. Can I bother you to drop the resolution on your display?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. Let's see here. Let me do this.
Be, like main desktop, drop the resolution. It's a little rough reading.
Yeah, it is. Let me
Apologies.
No, you're totally fine. I totally get it. Let's see here.
Just right click on the desktop. Okay.
Yeah, let me do that. Let's see here. Again.
Well, that may be better.
Yeah.
Try to just bring up the VM and see if that.
That's good. The problem is that we're doing HDMI to VGA.
Okay.
Yeah, that also kind of has an impact on it. Let me do this. There is a view option. So. a little bit there?
What happens if you drop the screen resolution button there? Would that work?
Under view?
Okay. You just had it.
Screen resolution?
And probably match that to what you had. Oh, yeah.
Like that? All right, now we're in business.
All right.
All right. Yeah, no problem, man. I definitely understand the wanting to be able to see it, so.
You're going to shift forward so you can.
Totally. So it was out of focus. Okay.
All right.
It's just me.
Okay. Well, all right. So just to kind of run back through the steps, just because, you know, basically you just got to have your browser proxy settings matching to what Burp has. In this case, you know, essentially, the proxy settings are going to be, you're just going to match it from here over to here. And now Burp is just listening on a localhost proxy. And basically what you're doing with the browser right there is you're just connecting it to that proxy. And then, of course, with the certificate, in order to be able to intercept HTTPS traffic, you know, you'll import the Burp root certificate. Mine is going to tell me it's already installed, but you'll get a little prompt to make it be able to trust websites and identify websites. So that way you can man in the middle of the encrypted traffic. So once that's done, what we're going to go and dive into also is attack scope, because here's the thing, again, is that attacking third-party sites or sites that you're not intending to go up against is, it's illegal. And not only that, but there's a lot of noise typically that's generated when you're visiting a website. For example, if you go to walmart.com, I'm going to actually show you guys this right now. Going to walmart.com, essentially, you're going to see the amount of requests that are generated is absolutely maddening on the left side, right? I mean, you can see how, just going to walmart.com, this is how many requests your browser is generating. Obviously, a majority of this is noise. We don't want anything to do with this. It's like advertisements, CDNs, you know, things of that nature. You just don't want to, be running, scans or recon against those hosts. They're just useless, right? So what we're going to do is we can just, at any time, of course, right-click and then, remove from scope. And your scope tab is where Burp is going to focus in, essentially. So in this case, I've already got a host set up that we're going to use. And what we're going to do is we can either manually add it in. You can kind of use a whitelist or a blacklist methodology. It kind of depends what you're doing. If you're going bug bounty hunting, you may want to use a blacklist methodology. You don't want to necessarily whitelist an interesting subdomain or something like that, that you may miss, maybe worth, poking at. But the blacklist methodology or the whitelist methodology may make more sense if you've already, let's say you've been paid to do a professional pen test and they've given you a list of hosts that are in scope to that particular pen test. You may just want to just import that list right in there and make that way you're not sending requests off, where you're not intending to. So we're just going to go ahead and delete the selected items here because we don't need those. We're just going to use our host box that I've set up here. You're going to log in with the username admin and the password, because why not, right? And we're going to do, because, again, I'm not going to show you how to craft specific, 30 to 35 minute, long SQL injection payloads. This is just here to give you an overview of all the tools available. We're going to go ahead and set that to low. So in scope, we're just going to do, I think the easier way here is just add the scope. And you can make it so it's going to prompt you automatically if you want to stop sending out-of-scope items to the history or other Burp tools. And so yes, this makes it easier if you're only attacking this one host, which we are in this case. So that's what we're going to do. Now, what we're going to do is you would typically, if you have like the Burp Pro version, there is a web spider you can do, and if you right-click and spider the host, it's going to crawl through every single, path on the website that it can find and give it to you, in a branch. I don't know. I've seen other people refer to having the free version with the spider. It must be an old version because mine doesn't have it. Mine's the most up-to-date version. Again, it's not something that's really necessary if you're, using the tool. It is kind of a convenience thing, and quite frankly, I'm not a huge fan of web spiders. They generate a lot of traffic. So jumping right into it, I'm going to kind of show you the individual tabs here. So the Proxy tab is kind of, as it, the name implies, when we turn the intercept on, what happens is, let's just say I enter, admin as the username and admin as the password, that request is going to sit there and hang because I've got the request hung with the interceptor, right? So I can go in here and I can modify the individual parameters of the request while I've got it hung, and that way I can sit here and take my time. I can sit here and prep the request, and I can hold it and edit individual parameters, and that way also as well, one thing you're going to notice a lot of times is anyone ever been on a website and there is like some sort of JavaScript that only lets you put letters and numbers in a field or something like that, or it's got a character, like, amount restriction, like only 8 to 16 characters. I'm sure everyone has at some point. So what this allows us to do, of course, is completely circumvent all client-side restrictions that, are imposed on the browser by JavaScript or, something like that. Here, we can make it as many characters as we want. We can add illegal characters, things like that. We can edit the individual headers of the request. And of course, you can get a hex dump of the request. This may be useful to you depending on your use case. But once we're done with it, we can forward it. And once
so you basically can use this to do your injection attack right there.
Right. You can just hold the request right then and there without having to, sit there and replay the request within the actual fields.
You can override the character limitation and do a full-on injection.
Any amount of characters, any sort of encoding illegal characters, you can basically do anything. In fact, what we're going to get into next is going to be even more pivotal in how you can kind of just break any rule that you want when it comes to what the web app is imposing on you, right? So, of course, we're going to have, the HTTP history, and what we're going to do is I'm just going to kind of clear all this out just because there's a lot of noise from the Walmart request I made. I'm going to input the wrong username and password again, and it's going to hold the request because I left the interceptor on. As soon as I turn it off, the request will just forward. They'll just send over and over again, right? I can start sending requests. Well, what I can do is, let's just say, type that in. I'm going to have that post request that, whoops, I clicked the wrong thing here. So I'm going to have that post request that I sent, or rather it's a GET request, I guess. That's not good practice. But so I can right-click on this, and you're going to get a context menu. Now, what you can do from any menu, any option, any tab on the screen, you can right-click on any sort of request and send it to any other sort of tool. So what I'm actually going to demonstrate first, the first tool I'm going to show is Intruder. Now, I just right-clicked on this request and sent it to Intruder. Now, the tab will kind of highlight at the top. And what it's going to do is it's going to automatically load the request in, that GET request, and essentially it's going to automatically highlight parameters that it thinks are interesting that you can attack. Now, in the free version of Burp, Intruder is kind of gimped, but Intruder is really more for automated attacks. It's not really for those handcrafted kind of, injections or, buffer overflows and things like that. It can be. There are modules that are written for it that can do that sort of thing. There are a lot of, SQL injection ones and things like that. However, again, not necessary to, get started. It starts getting a little bit more advanced when you get into that. Now, anytime you see this little green highlighting right here, that's where the parameters that it's going to try to attack are, right? So when you use the sniper parameter, it'll only just run through a single parameter. Now, if you have multiple parameters like battering ram, pitchfork, or cluster bomb,
That's great.
I love the name of it.
battering ram, pitchfork, and cluster bomb, for example, cluster bomb lets you run multiple word lists, like one word list on this parameter, and then another word list on this parameter. So pitchfork is kind of a different combination of that, and then battering ram, I think, just runs the same word list on all parameters. So in this case, really the parameter, we're just going to go ahead and guess the username is admin, right? You just, that's a good solid guess at what a username might be. So what I'm going to do is clear all the parameters. So the only thing I want to do is actually attack the password field. So I can just highlight that password field and then just hit add. And then I can go into payloads. And under payloads, because again, the free version only comes with one, for example, a simple list, I've already taken the liberty of creating a word list, terrible passwords that you would typically see, because this challenge, again, in the interest of time, I'm just demonstrating the tool. I've already made a word list that I know is going to crack this. But it's just to demonstrate, again, what you can really do and how versatile it can be. Again, when you download other payloads, there are open source and people have like GitHub, pages and everything full of like Burp Intruder payloads and stuff like that. You can just download for free right off the bat, just import it in. And
Is there a good one that you've used that's been successful, one that you keep on going back to?
So we're going to get to that later on. Yeah, so that's really what I would use Extender for, because Extender has a whole universe of options for Extender. Some of them, again, like I said, are totally invaluable, but we're going to get to that. So again, list of typical bad passwords you're probably going to see. What we can go ahead and do is once we have those payload options, we can actually create rules to process specific, logic on each, payload. For example, I want to double encode this and then, convert it to Unicode or something like that, or URL encode in JavaScript and then, escape it with HTML, which, again, also something Burp can do over here in Decoder, but we're going to get to that. But anywho, we're not going to run any complex payload processing, or we're just going to let it, encode the default. The options in the request header, it has some interesting things. You can make it grep for, or kind of search for specific strings. Like, for example, let's say you get a 302 found or login successful. You can search for that string and make it stop once it's found a certain string, in a request, or it's, matched a certain amount of bytes, or doesn't match a certain amount of bytes like we're about to see here. Once you've done that, you can hit start attack. It's going to give you the warning about Burp not being that as good as the paid version, which is okay, because then you're going to sit here and still run your attack. Now, as it's running through, we've kind of ran through several passwords. One that obviously sticks out is the one with the request length of 5,007 bytes instead of the 4963. Now, we know that 4963 is a failed login request, so if it's 5,007 bytes in response instead of the other one, we probably assume that that's the password, which in this case is literally the word password. And, of course, you get access once you enter that password. So Intruder, again, can be configured right on the fly for other things as well. You can use it to fuzz session IDs, and Sequencer can also use it to fuzz session IDs and tokens in login sessions. Really cool. But the brute force attack, I think, is really the just the simplest thing to display, and it's just an example of how easy it is to just run these sort of rules and payloads on any individual parameter. We're not even restricted necessarily by what it is highlighting. We can make this whatever we want if we need to. So I think that is a important tool to keep in the bag when you're using Burp for sure. Now, repeater is probably exactly how you would think. What we're going to do is we're going to pop over to the file upload vulnerability. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the intercept on to intercept this request. I'm going to browse, and this is supposed to be an image file upload, okay? So just choose an image to upload. You know, if I try to upload something, you know, it's .php5, probably not supposed to let me do that, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload that request, and it's going to hang it right here. So now we've actually got the raw data stream right here. And right now, because we've got the request hung, and it would be really hard to do this without a browser, without any additional plugins. I can just change the MIME type in the browser to image/JPEG and append a file name like .jpeg, .php5, or even .php. And what we can do is, you know what? Actually, I'm going to mess it up on purpose. I'm going to mess this up on purpose, hit forward, and it's still going to upload the file. Now, we did circumvent the file type restriction by changing the MIME type to image JPEG, but since PHP5 is not installed on this server, what you're going to see is when I try to navigate to that file to gain shell access to the server, let's see here. Copy that. Oh, I've got the I've got the proxy on still. Well, when we try to navigate to this, you're going to see that you get the thing about it displaying errors or whatever. And even if I try to, you know, run, you know, some sort of arbitrary command, it's not going to work because PHP5 is not installed on this server. Now, thankfully, we've got a post request right here that's got our upload that we've already done. We can just send that over to repeater here if we need to try again on the fly. And instead of this, let's just change the extension to .php instead. We can just change whatever parameters right here. It automatically knows what the parameters are in this request. It's automatically got your headers spread out, so you can sit here and edit any part of this. This is useful for a myriad of reasons, which can also be a pretty involved concept. But again, being able to edit the headers and things like that, you can control like how a server caches your requests and things like that sometimes can be useful for certain replay attacks. So we've got our crafted request again. Now what this is right here, this is a PHP reverse shell. All this does is basically just use PHP to call bin bash or bin sh to execute a shell command locally on the machine. So now that we've crafted this request, so we can see here that our request succeeded because we got the message that it was successfully uploaded. So now all we have to do, now we get a blank page instead of just a contains errors page. So now if we do cmd equals ls, we're starting to list files off the server. In fact, we can take it a step further. Let's just start, you know, ls, the root directory. Okay, now we've got the root directory here. How about we do, you know, something like this. Okay, now we have a list of users that are on the machine. Now, I would do a reverse shell right here, but I crash the web host every single time I do it when I was testing it. So in the interest of, again, having a good presentation here, not going to shell the server. But what I will tell you is that at this point, you can essentially just run netcat or something like that, or there's a lot of ways to do it with just bash or dev TCP on Linux, to where you can literally just basically set up a listening shell, you know, like that, and you can basically just have it connect back to you on a reverse shell. The only problem with PHP reverse shells is that it hangs the web application when you're doing it, because it's waiting on, so I think the best way I can explain this is you have two types of, shells. You have interactive TTY shells, programs like Nano, GDB, and other things like that kind of require you, if I'm in here, if I'm trying to edit a file, it's got a terminal bar up at the top, I'm able to navigate around and cursor. The program is considered interactive to the operating system. Whereas with this, we've only really got standard in, standard out, and standard error as our actual output vectors. So we can't, anytime we run a command that's going to require user interaction to close, it's going to hang the entire PHP daemon until it's completed or it's closed, and likely going to crash the server every time you do it. There are ways to do this without crashing it, but that's not, you wouldn't use Burp to necessarily do that. You would and you wouldn't, but it just depends on the type of thing that you're trying to do. Again, at this point, we've got pretty much full control over the web server. We're listing files off the web server. We've got a shell for all intents and purposes. So that's an example of using repeater and proxy to, replay back a request right on the spot if need be. So what we're going to go ahead and move on to now is decoder. So a lot of times when you are doing certain types of injection attacks, you're going to run into cases where you're going to need to encode your payload because, for example, and I know I've got some autocomplete history here, but essentially the web application is going to want this request encoded before it wants to process it on the back end, right? It doesn't like characters like spaces, dash, slashes, ampersands. It's special characters that you would normally escape when you're, dealing with, some sort of Unix environment, right? Now, a lot of it has to do as well with how PHP and other applications kind of parse input from program, and sometimes they just require encoding. Encoding can get a little funky sometimes, but what we're going to go ahead and do here is, so we can ping a site here, right? Imagine, you've seen websites before where, oh, ping this website for free, do a who is on this or whatever, right? Well, and poor implementations, can exist command injection vulnerabilities, because this looks like literally the ping utility from the operating system that's running. So we could probably assume it's being passed down to a bash script or something like that. So what we can do is we can take this request and we can send it over to repeater. And, we can see we have two parameters here, IP and, of course, the submit parameter. Now, let's just say I want to start injecting commands into this. Let's say I want to run, let's say ifconfig instead of a ping, right? I'm going to probably append a pipe character just to see if it's going to let me, because in Linux, of course, if I do ping 1, it's just going to run through that. But if I pipe something, you can see where, I've piped another command and, essentially changed the logic of that one-liner. We can do the same thing like right in here, except what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click and highlight this and send this to the decoder. And in the decoder, you're now going to have a lot of options here that, to me, are invaluable. You've got in an encode version, you can hash any sort of hashing algorithm you want, from obscure, MD4 and SHA-384. I mean, some of these cipher, are these hash, algorithms I haven't even heard of. But you can hash things like that. You can also decode if you've got an encoded string you need to decode. But in this case, we're probably just going to want a URL encode. And you can see that we've now got this right here. And we can undecode strings like decode as plain smart decode, and now it can bring it right back again. So really, any sort of encoding that you've got, you can just decode it right on the fly. No matter what you've got here, it's, whether it's octal, hex, ASCII hex, base 64, gzip, which gzip you're going to run into a lot of times with embedded firmware. I've noticed they really like LZMA and gzip. Don't know why. And BusyBox, but that's.
So this is how you could actually encode a file traversal.
Yes, you can. Yes. So with path traversals, you do typically have to encode them. So with like a file inclusion like this, dot slash, you know, et cetera, password, right? It's not going to work.
Right. But you can encode that and then pass that.
You can encode it right here. I can just do dot slash. And you have to append a null byte when you're doing file inclusion, because a null byte is a terminator in PHP, which prevents the REST query from running. So now we should be able to put that in there. You would think. Let's see here. They're not far enough back. No such file directory yet. Right. So I guess this automatically encodes on some of the harder challenges. You have to encode the payload. This is literally like on like the lowest security setting. But yeah, so like on the harder challenges, you do have to encode the payload. Like you mentioned, I've never seen a file inclusion in the wild that you literally just dot slash it like this. Really wouldn't happen. You've got bigger problems if you can do this. Like a lot bigger problems. And a lot of times with this, you're going to get remote file inclusion as well. So you can literally just stand up like a Python HTTP server, port forward out to the internet, host a malicious PHP script, put the actual URL of the actual site you're hosting, the IP with the, the file name, and then you're going to be able to load arbitrary PHP scripts onto the actual site and have them interpreted and ran in the context of the actual site itself. So obviously, if you have something like this going on, you've got big problems, like bigger than I can even fix. Yeah, you've got problems. So anywho, so yeah, decoder, extremely powerful tool. And this, a lot of times, if you're going for cross-site scripting, for examples on stored XSS, I may, for example, really the easiest way to do this, there's a whole site, in fact, called, no need to really reinvent the wheel here if you're just testing for things. There's literally a site called xsspayloads.com. You can kind of see here where you've really got a number of things that are going to, be available right off the bat. You can modify this code. I don't recommend just totally copy and pasting it. Modify it to your needs if, required. But, for example, some of these requests here, you can see, you can take this JavaScript, and I'm not going to put a keylogger on my own DBWA, but, it's one of those things where there's a lot of possibility there. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to use one of the alert variants, because alert is the easiest way to test for something like this, at least in my opinion. Now, you can just take something like that, and we can do this, and we can actually have it encode as like HTML. Take that, and it should work. Okay, so there's a character limit in this case, right? So let's just do AA. We're going to go to the proxy. We're going to go back to intercept. We're going to turn it on. We're going to go to sign our guest book here because, we want to have our names up there. And because there's a character limit, we don't care about that at all. Now let's go back and turn our intercept off. So it didn't pop an alert in my browser, but the actual comment didn't load or render. You could probably play with that and get it to pop an alert box. It can also depend on your browser. Keep in mind with cross-site scripting, whatever JavaScript conventions that respective browsers, abide by, you're going to also have to account for that. There's really no one cross-site scripting payload that's going to, work on every single browser, regardless of what it is. It's just the nature of how it works. Well, like I said, some of these I know for a fact, some of these do not. This one just unbase64s it, for example. Let's see here. I bet you, though, if we just did this, you can see I now get, the one alert box when it pops up. So let's just say, you've got a comment box on a website. I'm sure everyone has heard of the Sandy worm from MySpace back in the day, where it was a comment box, cross-site scripting, and you could make it follow other people and comment the cross-site scripting payload recursively between profiles, and everyone who viewed that profile unknowingly kept on spreading it because they were also, the JavaScript was making them run and comment on other people's posts with that same payload recursively. So it literally, I think it hit like 2 million profiles in like 24 hours or something like that. So cross-site scripting also can, if you do alert or alert document.cookie, let's take back one of those. So imagine if someone echoes the value of document.cookie into a remote host that now stores that cookie value and into some sort of arbitrary, database. They can now take these cookies and put them into your browser, and now they are you until you click log out. But a lot of people stay logged in the website, so something like this can stay valid for a long time, and all they have to do is just load that session ID into their browser. They're now you. They've stolen your session, pretty much.
So essentially, a couple of things here. So you can use Burp Suite to test your own security.
That is correct.
But in this particular case, the largest portion of this can be taken care of just by making sure you have data validation when you're doing your program, correct?
That is correct. Sanitization of, parameters and user input is obviously the best practice there. You don't want raw SQL queries and raw HTML being written right to, a page, especially that can be reflected to other users, or even worse, stored in this case. The stored ones are really bad because, all you have to do is get them to visit the page. And in a real XSS attack, you're not going to be alerted with a JavaScript pop-up box that your session cookies are being funneled out to some Nigerian server, right? It's not going to work like that. You're going to be none the wiser. It's going to be totally invisible on the page as JavaScript, right? So, again, though, a sanitization of what users are, inputting, making sure, you're not, especially with, XSS, there's a lot of reflected XSS out there as well. Stuff like this, only, I send them a link. It's not like it's stored on a page. It's a specially crafted link or something that gets them to actually execute the client-side code. Stored XSS is just so nasty because, again, it executes so unknowingly. You don't have to click a suspect link in order to, get it to run, which is what this one kind of demonstrates as well. You can see it's in the link here, but if I do that, I send someone this link, for example, this is just proof that I can run arbitrary JavaScript, on whatever person I want. And Burp, again, can also help you circumvent, let's say there's a comment box, it's got 50 character limit, 60 character limit. We don't have to respect that. Doesn't matter. We've got full control. Unless the site on the back end is validating how many characters we're putting in, like truly validating and not just using a client-side check, then, we're going to obviously just steamroll right past it.
So can I use Burp Suite to interject a commerce site that has the code built in? My circuit board costs $400 and then recreate that query to say it only costs $25 and then pass that through?
If there was poor validation of the actual, post parameter, let's just say that the site operated its price solely on what that get parameter said, or that whatever that post parameter said, then yeah, Burp Suite would allow you to name your price, essentially. And like I said, again, that's why actual back-end validation is so important. You never want to use client-side validation for any sort of security intensive or anything that needs to respect, some sort of access control and integrity, basically. Because anything, you could just assume any data that's client-side is compromised already from day one. Like there's no such thing as secure client-side data. The client has full control over what they're sending. If there was a poor e-commerce site that literally just operated to where it, the actual web page parameter, like price, came from a parameter on the web page, and yeah, Burp would just run right through it. And it would be, well, it would be awesome, right? So I'm thinking. And, you start to go back and you think of all the internal sites, that, your organization may host and things like that. Think of some of the legacy code that some of that operates on. Can it handle having 800 characters thrown into one of its parameters? Can it handle, injection attacks that don't respect whatever the limitations are? It's something to consider, when you're talking about, simple, like exterior threats versus, actual advanced persistent threats, that once they're in the network and everything, I mean, they're going to be using tools like Burp Suite to attack machines. It's just a reality. And quite frankly, this is the same tool that a lot of bad guys are using, but it can be used for a lot of good as well. It's just the nature of a tool when it's that good. You're going to have attention from both sides. Your blue team and your red team, pen testers, the people that do it, legitimately, white hats, and you're going to have people that use it for evil as well. But we're going to try to use it for good. And hopefully at all times that should be at the forefront of our thought processes, ethics, when we're using skills like this to do things. So the last thing I'm going to touch on is Burp Extender. Burp Extender is badass. I'm just not even going to lie. It's awesome. So Burp Extender has a store. And you can see here, these are all, well, as soon as okay. Yeah, so these are all plugins that are available for Burp Suite. You can just click on and install right from the Burp Suite store. In fact, the detail lets you sort by ones that require Burp Suite Professional versus the ones that don't. As you can see, there's quite a few that are going to work right on the first version or on the free version. So again, you got things like, ad hoc payload processors, auto repeaters, AWS signer, browser repeater, certain types of command injection, tools, CSRF token tracker, custom loggers. You name it. Someone has written a Burp Extender module for it if you need it. And if not, you can literally write them right on the fly if you've got the knowledge to do so. For example, I installed one called Logger Plus. Allows you to take all your Burp data. You can export it right into CSV format, Excel, create reports, right on the fly for, professional-looking reports. Let's say, you're doing legit pen testing, being able to dump that data right out, run reports on it, create a pivot table here. This is how many requests allowed, X, Y, Z, options for HTTP. You can color code it, of course, and run regular expressions on, you know, the data that goes through it and everything like that. And like I said, I'm not going to dive into every single Burp extender plugin because obviously there's literally hundreds. This is all available to anyone that just takes a Kali, you know, machine and starts up Burp Suite. This is all available. Anyone can go home right now and do this for free. Everything I'm showing you, which is kind of what I wanted to, you know, portray here is that, you know, you don't need a $400 a year subscription to necessarily get started doing this. All the tools to get started and really, you know, begin getting, you know, into this realm are right here and available. And one last tool I'm going to touch on as well is Comparer. I don't have a lab or like a example to do this on. Usually you would use Comparer and Sequencer to do things like session replay attacks and such, where you're trying to, let's just say you're trying to figure out how random a session token actually is. Maybe you can just repeat the same request with small iterations on the bytes and things like that to, you know, see, okay, well, actually we can determine what the session token is going to be based on, you know, we've sent, you know, this many requests and they all, you know, follow the same pattern. We can recreate other people's session tokens. That's kind of a pretty in-depth attack, not something I'm going to be able to demonstrate here with, but letting you know, yeah, you can do full-on authentication and session attacks with Burp. And like I said, that's pretty much going to cover the free version. Now I've got a second part here, 10 minutes left. All pretty cool. So differences between the free and premium version is that there's no automated scanner, no right-click, fire and forget. You're not going to, you know, just have it scan the entire site and tell you what vulnerabilities it automatically finds. I kind of mentioned this with the dashboard. It doesn't tell you when it automatically knows, like, if there's a vulnerability when you're doing requests. Sometimes the tool can tell based on, okay, well, there's a SQL error returned in this response. I know there's a SQL injection there. Spider is gimped, or once I mentioned kind of gimped or just completely missing in my case. Mine was supposed to come with it. Again, older versions I think had it. Some extender plugins require premium. Intruder is missing some nice features, but again, still very usable. There are alternatives though. Attack Proxy. So, does everyone in here know what OWASP is? For the most part. Okay. So OWASP is the free open source attack proxy Burp alternative. It is literally just basically the free Burp alternative. It's open source, maintained by the OWASP project. It's going to function pretty much the same way. I'll tell you that I actually learned Z attack proxy. Well, let me go back actually. I learned Z attack proxy prior to learning Burp. There are certain things that are nice about it, and it's still a very usable attack proxy. It's got an automated security scanner and like things like that built in by default. Some of the automated scans hit way too hard, and you can't. There's not a lot of options to dial them back like a whole lot. So if you're going to be running it against like production servers, I just can't really recommend that you do that because some of the payloads, again, they'll make databases sleep for like 60+ seconds and stuff like that. And yeah, you don't want to do that if you want to have servers crash, right? So still a great tool. Some of the stuff is like clunkier. There's no like, for example, right click and just automatically send to whichever tool, you know, available in the module. There's the repeater is called the manual request editor, and it is manual. It is very manual, let me tell you that. Not exactly the most intuitive thing. However, credit where it's due. Love the tool. Think it's a great starting point if you're kind of, you know, wanting some additional security scanner features, but may not want to shell out that $399 yet. But again, very capable tool and can do a lot of what Burp does, just not as smoothly and a little bit clunkier. This It's also included in Kali. I would really almost struggle to call it a Burp alternative, but it's another automated kind of security scanner. It's W3 attack framework. Really what this does is vulnerability scanning, and it can kind of proxy and things like that and do manual requests and encode, decode. It's nothing spectacular. Again, it's another free tool. Wouldn't, again, run this against anything necessarily that, you're really, it's not as tunable. You're going to get way better results with something like Tenable Nessus or, OpenVAS or QRadar. They're automated vulnerability scanners, a lot more granular control, better definitions and updates, threat feeds and everything like that. Overall, this is a great tool, to learn how security scanners work and things like that. Another alternative comes pre-installed. All three of the tools I mentioned come pre-installed with Kali, so you can fire any of them up. The setup is practically identical. It just involves configuring your browser to a proxy and accepting a root certificate generated by the program. Questions and answers?
I played with that before, and you're right about it being not recommended running its production, because I did, and I was trying to break PHP websites that faculty had written, and it worked, and I sent about 4,000 emails to a mailbox because they didn't do any validation, and it did just like...
Sound like a parameter or something that fired off like a mail.
But it worked. I mean, they didn't
You got the end result.
I did.
That's an awesome story to share, actually. I'm glad that you have some experience with that tool. Yeah, it's again, not a bad tool. I'm sure you could, if you wanted to go dive into the Java and everything like that, the actual source code, you could probably dial it back a lot. Again, the whole thing's open source, so if you want to do that, I mean, one could do it. But again, you've got Burp Suite. It's like the free version just does so much right off the bat. And anything else, I'm just going to be quite honest, like if you need automated SQL injection, just use SQL map. Like, most of the extenders in Burp are written around SQL map or things like that. And some SQL injection, you're just not going to be able to automate. And Hydra is probably going to be a better option for brute forcing sometimes. It depends on what your end goal and what your needs are. There may be a time where you need more granular control over the tools that Burp may not offer. That's on a case-by-case basis, and I think it's something that someone should kind of determine on their own once they've, kind of had experience with both.
Is anybody on the call?
Anyone on the WebEx or the call have any questions? Do we still have anyone on the WebEx is the real question.
Anybody else have any other questions for Logan?
So you showed DBWA as a target.
Yes.
Are there other learning platforms for folks if they want to dive in and learn Burp, that?
Oh, yeah.
Which ones have you found were best for you to exercise?
I really like OWASP Juice Shop a lot.
Okay.
OWASP Juice Shop is free. It's also developed by OWASP. It's literally just kind of, as the name implies, a phony juice shop that you can host on a Vagrant machine on your own. You host it as a local host VM and begin attacking this website. It's vulnerable to everything in the OWASP top 10, I think. So as far as that goes, it's a great practice. I know there's also Web for Pen Tester parts 1 and 2 you can get into. Also, Hack the Box. Can't recommend it enough, man. I do it. I do the new box every week on it, and I just gotta say, like, Hack the Box is gonna give you like pretty realistic situations. Now, some of it's kind of CTF-ish, like, you're gonna see things that are kind of unrealistic to happen, but there's a lot of stuff that's like extremely realistic. Like you're gonna see it. Like you probably see it in your own company. Like if you're not, that's a legacy unpatched box. I mean, there's going to be, it's all built from real life examples. So yeah, those resources are a really great one. There's a few other ones out there like Over the Wire. Over the Wire is, of course, a classic and, a must do. I think the Bandit challenges are the, no, it's not Bandit, the Natas challenges are the web ones. So